We're going for the crimped hair look at the moment because that's all that my long, very thick hair is gonna hold. Hi, hello, welcome. My name is Michaela. I'm a PhD student at the University of Tübingen. I'm originally from New Zealand, but my husband and I moved to Germany in December of 2021 for my studies. And today we're doing a good old sit down chat. So grab your coffee, grab your tea, I've got some water because I always talk too fast and then my throat dries out. So, you know, grab a drink and we're gonna have a chat about all of the websites that I could not live without for my PhD. And I just want to do a little disclaimer here at the beginning that you don't have to be doing a PhD in medieval history for this to be relevant to you. Obviously, if that was the case, there'd be like one person who clicks on this video, potentially one person who actually cares about that. But no, I've kind of thought about general things that I have found invaluable in my PhD. And to be honest, if you're a student, if you're studying, if you're working in academia, if you're self-employed, if you need some sort of time management thing, if you work or study to do with anything in the humanities, if you do anything to do with languages, if you're learning a language, if you want to buy stuff online, basically one section of this will be relevant to you, at least one section if not more, because I feel like there's a lot of things that I wish I had have known about earlier in my studies or when I was working that I'm glad that I know now, and now I've compiled it all together and yeah, let's talk about it. So basically there are 3 different categories that I have sorted these things all into. The first one is organization, the second one is languages, and the third one is books. This is basically the main areas of my PhD, and that's why I said at least one of these sections should be relevant to you. But yeah, we'll start with organization because I feel like that's going to be the most relevant to most people probably. I am going to try and overlay some videos of what I mean so that hopefully you can see these things in action and not just be like taking my word for it. But I have been using online organization tools for as long as I can remember. I'm definitely not someone who stuck to hard paper books or anything like that throughout my studies. I think even from like my first year of university, I was taking notes on Google Drive. I tried using OneDrive and, is it called OneNote? But I absolutely hated them. I still use Google Drive a bit, which you'll have seen in some of my study with me videos. But the overall organization tool that I have settled on is Notion. You've probably heard a lot of people talk about Notion. It's definitely become a lot more trendy. And I have been using Notion for like 2 or 3 years, maybe 2 years. And at first I was using it in a very basic way because it's very, very easy to just create to-do lists, to collaborate with people. So like Luke and I have our own home version, but then also build travel sections so I can plan out trips that we're doing or basic notes that I need to keep for myself. I started doing my YouTube planning on there and my work planning on there. And it's very easy to make little lists of what you need to do, what you're currently doing, what you're doing, and then archiving, stuff like that. And so I found it very versatile even when I was using the very basic version. The one thing that I've done this year is I have upgraded it slightly in finding a free template online. Basically, somebody else has put in the work to make it pretty and have all of these different sections that can really help you. So for example, I downloaded the free template from Jenna Hong. She's a YouTuber that I've been following for ages because she's really good on finding balance in your work life and doing really well in your work life, but then also having a life outside of work. And she uses Notion. I've been following how she uses Notion for a while, and I felt like it was going to be a significant jump to move from what I was doing to what she was doing, until I realized that at the beginning of that year she'd actually posted a free template. And so I ended up downloading her free template. It's the 2023 template, and I basically just customized it for my own. But she also has, I think it's come out like a week ago, her new 2024 template, which is slightly upgraded. I haven't had a look at it, so I can't vouch for it. I'm sure that it's great, but I'm really happy with her 2023 template. It basically has everything that you need in one place, and I really love all of the widgets and everything where it says how far through the day you are, how far through the year, how far through the month. You can customize it to have your location and what the temperature is in that place at the moment, and it's got a clock. But then she also has different segments. So all of her work stuff I have customized to my uni stuff, for example. And so I've moved most of my templates that I was already using into her template and kind of just changed it up so it fits with what she was doing. And then I've taken a couple of her pages that she used for work productivity and life productivity and put it into my section. And then she's got a whole section for personal goals and growth and development, and so I've been able to use those quite a lot as well. I track my language learning on there, and I kind of keep up to date with where I'm up to on Duolingo, the books that I'm reading in different languages at the moment, and yeah, it's where I've got all the links to my spreadsheets and everything, and it's just really nice having all of the hubs in one place. I also find with Notion, the reason I switched from primarily taking notes on Google Drive to primarily taking notes on Notion is simply because of the search function. I think that it is one of the best search functions I've found for notes, in the sense that if you're taking notes of readings, or I don't know, if you're working in an industry where you have to take notes on a whole bunch of different subjects and everything, with the search function through Notion, it searches everything. So you can type, so for example, if it's something relevant to me, I'll type in temporality, and every single section or every single page that you've written that has the word temporality on it will be searched and list up there, and it's got a little preview, which yes, Google Drive does, but when you search in Google Drive, it kind of just comes up with a list of pages that supposedly has something to do with temporality, but it doesn't give you that preview. And I find the previews really helpful because sometimes it says temporality because I've written a note to myself and so I want to read that note again, but sometimes it says temporality because it's taken in a footnote and it isn't actually as relevant to that main text, and so you can really save time and do quick flick throughs of what you want to reread. And so that section has actually been the biggest part for me in my PhD journey, is having that search function, but then also being able to sort all of my notes, because in Google Drive obviously I just have like a whole bunch of pages of notes that I'd taken while reading, but the fact that I can classify them by topic, so I can sort them into Gregory of Tours or temporality or 6th century Gaul context, has been really helpful. And then I can also mark, I've added it to Zotero, for example, or I've sorted the notes into a big document, which I do just before writing a section. And so I can really stay up to date on what I've looked at, and it just, I don't know, it just makes life so much easier as a student. But if you're not a student, I can also see how versatile it would be for the workplace, especially the collaborative section. And so yeah, I feel like Notion is the thing that has really upgraded my PhD life the most. It's made things so much easier, and also, I don't know, I just love the look of Notion. I feel like it's super easy to work through, super intuitive. You don't really have to work that hard to understand it for something that is so helpful. The second thing that I want to talk about under organization is Clockify. I know that time tracking is a very debated topic in people who are self-employed, in people in the workspace, in students. Everyone seems to have their own opinion on this, but I'm somebody who works best with a plan and who works best with data. And so for me, time tracking really helps me see how much time I'm spending on each task, especially because it's got the function where you can do billable tasks and unbillable tasks. So for me, my PhD, I'm on scholarship, I'm counting that as a billable task, and my work in New Zealand, making sure that I'm actually keeping on top of my hours, because I do everything remote and it can be very easy to fall behind if I'm not thinking about staying on top of it. And so having that section come up as a billable task shows that for me it's a higher priority. But then I also have smaller tasks, like I want to know how much time I'm spending on my language learning. Like I'm not just doing Duolingo, because I don't think that's a be all and end all for learning a language. I'm reading books in Spanish and in German at the moment, and so being able to see how much time I'm spending on language learning at the moment, and how much time I'm spending on YouTube, for example, or basically any of the tasks that I find are really high priority tasks in my life, I want to time track because I want to know, one, how many hours I'm actually working in a week. Like, I'm feeling exhausted at the end of the week and I'm pulling really long days, but have they been consistent? Like, I want to know if I'm taking a 2-hour lunch break without realizing it because I'm getting caught up talking to people in the office, or we had to walk a little bit further for lunch, or I'm at home and I'm watching a movie over lunch and I just don't realize how much time has passed. For me, I want to know exactly what my days are looking like so that I can be informed and try to change up my routine potentially the following week. But I do know some people find it really overwhelming seeing that, and some people find it too intensive or too like microscopic for what they're doing, and I totally get that. But for me, as somebody who loves having data right in front of me that I cannot argue with, I absolutely love having Clockify. The sections that I find the most helpful is obviously the time tracking section, but also the report section, where at the end of each week, or honestly it doesn't matter, you can set it for a month, you can set it for a week, you can set it for a specific task, whatever it is, you can go through and see how many hours you've spent on that. And I find that really helpful, especially for the work side of my life. And so making sure that my job, which I have part-time, is 7.5 hours a week, making sure that I'm doing those 7.5 hours a week. And my PhD, I'm supposed to be doing between 30 and 40 hours a week, making sure that I'm doing between 30 and 40 hours a week. And obviously it's not going to be perfect every single week and you can't control everything, but I don't think that's the reason I use Clockify. It's not for control, it's for information. And so I've looked at so many time tracking tasks, and especially ones that track your screen so they can see how much time you're spending on Chrome, for example, or how much time you're spending on Outlook. That is something that I'm not so interested in. I don't really care about how much time I'm spending on Chrome because pretty much my entire PhD is spent in Chrome, judging by the fact that I just told you that I use Notion for everything and I use Google Drive for everything, and I generally do my readings through Chrome. I don't do it through, I don't know, Adobe or whatever function you might be using. And so it would be completely whacked out if it was just looking at Chrome for the whole day. And so it's not that side of it that I'm interested. I'm more interested in me getting to the office and logging that I've started work for the day and pausing it for a lunch break and changing from my part-time job to my PhD, and I can see exactly how I've done with that. So for me, it's really, really helpful for staying on task, and I find it's the best time tracking software out there. I'm also on the free version, and so I really like that I don't have to pay for it. I'm a student, I don't have all the money in the world, and so having some sort of time tracking software that I don't have to pay with but is actually good time tracking software is unbeatable. So yeah, I definitely recommend Clockify if you're self-employed. Like Luke uses it and he's self-employed, and he finds it's really helpful because it is the data that he needs to know how much he's spending on each thing. Because when you're self-employed, you don't have anyone telling you, oh, you need to spend 2 hours on this task and 30 minutes on this task. It's kind of just however long you spend on it. And so he's definitely someone who runs overtime a lot when he doesn't realize how much time he spent, and it just depends on how much detail he feels like going into. There are so many things that he could have done in half an hour that he said took him 4 hours just because he kept fiddling with it and trying to perfect it. And he didn't realize because the time was just passing. So he's found Clockify really helpful, and yeah, I definitely recommend it if you're looking for some sort of time tracking software. So that's it for the organization section. I know that was really long, but those are the two things that I actually spend the most time on in my work week, in my daily life. Like everything I kind of organize through Notion and Clockify, and so there was a lot to go through with that. But the next session I want to talk about is languages. Obviously this isn't going to relate to everyone because not everyone is reading text in different languages, not everyone is writing emails in different languages, but if you are someone who has to deal with languages in any way, whether it be that you're learning a language or you're living in a country where the language is not your mother tongue, or basically just anything to do with languages, these websites will be really, really helpful for you. The first one I want to talk about is DeepL, because I wish I knew about DeepL when I was in New Zealand. I don't know how new this website is, but I have never heard of this until I came to Germany, and everyone was like using it for everything and like translating all of their emails through it, or it integrates into a lot of companies if they have to have websites in different languages, and everyone uses it. And I was like, how is everyone writing so well in multiple different languages? And I realized they're using DeepL. So basically DeepL has multiple different functions. The main one is the free version, where you can input plain text and it will translate it into whatever language you want. There is a character limit on that, but I mean, if you're writing paragraphs, you can just put it paragraph by paragraph. It's really not the end of the world. You can also upload documents, which I recently found out yesterday that they don't have to be searchable documents. So if you have scanned yourself a PDF and it's not searchable, you can still put it into DeepL and it will translate, which is great because I have software that makes a document searchable, but that increases the size of the file so much that then DeepL won't accept it unless I pay for like the ultimate premium subscription. And I do not do that because, again, I'm a student with limited money. And so the fact that it does take unsearchable documents, so just like plain images, is life-changing. It has so many different languages, and I have to say it is the best translator out there that I've found, which is corroborated by the fact that I know a lot of companies in Germany that actually use it research for translation services. Obviously they still have people to check stuff, and I definitely recommend, if you're putting stuff in there, to check it, because sometimes if you're writing in one language, the words that it translates it into might not have the same connotations in that other language, or they might have multiple words to say the same thing depending on what you're trying to say. And so you definitely have to check it, but doing the bulk of it, the bulk of the translation, is incredibly helpful. And if you're a student who's working with lots of different languages, having DeepL is incredibly helpful, because it's meant for me that I've been able to access things in Italian, for example, where I'm only learning Italian at the moment. My Italian is very, very basic. I can basically say dog and cat and rabbit. So it's not very helpful, but having something like DeepL to translate those, just to get a basic idea of a text, to figure out if it's going to be worth it for you or not, or helpful for you or not, is incredible. I actually do pay for DeepL. I pay for the cheapest of the 3 subscriptions, and it basically just increases the size limit of the document that you can upload and ask it to translate, and it increases the character limit. I think it's unlimited text at that point if you insert it as plain text. So I pay for it just because as part of my PhD I have a research cost section, and it's supposed to go to stuff like buying books or programs that will really help. And I think DeepL is like 10 euros a month or something, and so I have paid for the basic subscription just so that I don't have to try and input it in paragraph by paragraph, and I can translate most of my articles that I'm reading are under the 10 megabyte limit, and so it fits within that, and then I don't have to try and split it up into multiple different documents just to put it through DeepL. So yeah, I mean, if you're looking for an online translator, or you want to use something that's not Google Translate, DeepL is honestly the most accurate thing out there. And I can say that because I know businesses that use it, and I also know that most of the professors at my university use it when they're dealing with foreign students, or if they're writing stuff themselves and they want to check something. I know that a lot of people use DeepL, so I definitely recommend it. And I wish that I had known about this when I was in undergrad, because I used Google Translate, which you have to edit a lot, obviously. And then I found that Word, like Microsoft Word, had a translation function, but it was very clunky. It wasn't bad, it was just clunky. And so having DeepL, it's the best one out there. I definitely recommend. And then for me personally, there are 2 websites that are really helpful for my language stuff, and that is dict.cc and Spanish Dict. I am spending most of this year on improving my Spanish and my German, and so having those open while I'm reading the books. I mentioned earlier that I'm reading books in Spanish and German this year, obviously of varying levels. I think my Spanish books are only A1, A2 level that I'm reading, but still having those websites open, I found that those are the best ones for translation for individual words and getting information about those words. So, I mean, that was just a very quick mention that I wanted to put out there in case you're also doing Spanish or German. But they're invaluable, I'd have to say, and they're really helpful with conjugations and all of that. So dict.cc and Spanish Dict I would highly recommend if you're learning either of those languages. And then the final website to do with languages that I wanted to mention is Lingui. Lingui, I don't know if anyone's heard of this, but I had to actually use this in high school, so I've known about this for a really long time. And basically what it does is you can put a word in any language. I think it does most of the main languages. It doesn't have as many languages as DeepL, but you can put a word and ask for it to translate it into German, or say you're putting it in English, you can ask it to translate into German or French or Spanish, and what it will do is it will search the web for places where that word has been used, and so it will translate that word into many different ones depending on what it means. Like if you are looking for a word in English that has multiple translations depending on the connotations, it will go through and list those so you can click on which one you want. But when it searches the web for uses of it, it shows it working in a sentence, and so you can actually see the way that people use it rather than just being like, oh yeah, that means that, and so I'm going to use that word. This is the definition of the word, and this is it being used in a sentence so that you can check if that's actually what it means. And I found that incredibly helpful when I'm trying to write in German or write in Spanish, and I translate a word using dict.cc or Spanish dict, but I don't really fully understand if it's got the connotations that I want it to have. I can go to Lingui and I can put that in and I can see the way that people have used it. But it's also really helpful because it's searching what people actually write. And so I think there's a lot of things that if you're a language learner, you learn things through things like Duolingo or through whatever language course that you might be doing that is technically correct, but nobody uses that. So for example, I have recently been diagnosed with asthma and I bought an inhaler. And so in English, I would say I need to use my inhaler, but they don't say that in German. They normally say the verb for inhalating, if that makes sense. And so it's stuff like that where you can put it into Lingui and figure out how do people actually say this nowadays, so that you're not using like archaic sentence structures or whatever. You're actually using the way that people talk. I find this really helpful as well when writing emails or writing letters to people who you don't know. It shows you greetings, for example, like sehr geehrte Damen und Herren is the German way to say to whom it may concern, and different ways to sign off your email. Like it's so practical for seeing ways that people currently use the language that I would be lost without it, if I'm honest. And to be honest, that's most of it for languages. You can have a look through the websites yourself. I don't want to talk too much about them because it's not as relevant to everybody. But the last section I want to go on to is books. I have the problem where I live in a country where this language is not my native language. And yes, I am learning this language, but it doesn't mean that every single new contemporary fiction book that I read, I want to be in German. No, that is not the case. But also I'm doing medieval history, I'm a student, I have to buy books as part of that because sometimes I just can't get the textbook through my university, or I read a textbook and I realize this is a book I'm going to want to read again and again and again and revisit, and I do not want to have to go back to the library and check it out again and again and again. And so sometimes I want to buy those books. And so for those two different sections, I have found buying books online to be the best solution. In New Zealand, if I wanted secondhand books, I know where all the secondhand bookshops, or at least I know where all the good secondhand bookshops are if I ever wanted to get anything, but I can't do that here because I live in a small town in Tübingen, and I also live in a town where most of the secondhand bookshops have books in German, and they're old books in German, and so I don't understand them or they aren't relevant to me. Obviously, I don't want to put a thing out there and say it's not relevant to me at all, because it is, and I've looked through them a lot and actually found a lot of cool books. But if it's related to my studies, unfortunately, those are not really the best places to go. So I have turned to online. The first one I've learned is ZVAB, basically, which seems to be linked with Abe Books. I don't know if it's connected, but they have the exact same website, and so I'm going to assume at least the same website layout. It's just that the advertising side of it and their brand is all different. But ZVAB and Abe Books are the first ones that I turn to when I'm looking for books, because they have a lot of antiquarian books, and so if you're studying medieval history, it's the best place to find those ones. or it's got a lot of textbooks for good prices, but it also looks at sellers that aren't just in Germany. So sometimes my textbooks might come from the UK, especially if they're books written in English. They usually come from the UK. They also display some books in America. Just means that the shipping is going to be a bit higher, but sometimes you can get a textbook for incredibly cheap, as long as you don't mind paying for the shipping. And so I find that those two websites are really helpful for books like that. However, if you want really cheap books, I found World of Books to be the best. And if you've been on my channel for a little while now, you'll know that Luke gave me a 25-day book advent calendar for Christmas last year, and every single day I got to open another book. And I'm a huge proponent of buying secondhand books rather than constantly buying new books. Obviously, if you want to support the author, that is absolutely great, but if you are someone on a budget and you don't always love reading off a screen, especially if you're resulting to pirating, I'm very mixed emotions about pirating books, especially with the current climate that we have with authors at the moment, that I am all for buying secondhand books, especially if they're like 2, 3 or 4 euros. That is not bad for buying a book, but I cannot find it for that price here in Tübingen, especially not for the contemporary fiction books, a lot of good quality books that aren't just ridiculously expensive. I always go to World of Books, and Luke got my 25-day advent calendar books from World of Books. Unfortunately, he bought them from the UK version because I didn't realize that there was a German version. But I've since found out that World of Books actually has a German version, and if you use the website for the country that you're currently living in, so for example if you are in the UK and you use World of Books in the UK, there is free domestic shipping. Same thing in Germany, you have free domestic shipping if you buy it on the German website, and I did not know that. And so he bought them all from the UK thing, and we had to pay a bunch for shipping. It's fine, we deal with it now, but we could have got it cheaper had we got it from the German version of the website. Anyway, all of that is to say is that it isn't just contemporary books, it is a lot of classics, it's a lot of textbooks. It really depends on who has sold their books or given their books to World of Books, and you can't always guarantee that you'll get everything on there. Obviously, if you're looking for contemporary fiction, you can pretty much guarantee that you're going to get it. Might not be 4 euros, but you can pretty much guarantee getting it. With the textbooks, I recently bought a textbook for my PhD, and it ended up being 20 euros on World of Books, which is unbelievable because I don't know what publishing does, but most history textbooks, if you buy them, or like monographs or whatever you want to call them, like 120 euros brand new. It's just too much. I'm a PhD student. I have limited money here, but I can buy a second-hand version in good quality for 20 euros. That much I can do. And so that's what I've done. I bought it on World of Books, and it comes within 5 to 10 days. So really, it's all of these websites that I'm finding because I'm having to find alternatives for just going in person to all of these independent bookshops or all of the secondhand bookshops that they had around Auckland City, because that's what I'm used to. I'm finding alternatives for it here in Germany, and plus it's really nice to support these smaller businesses rather than always buying books on Amazon, which I'm now against. I've previously bought books on Amazon, and I have been kind of looking at the state of book selling, and I've watched a lot of videos on why Amazon is so cheap, and so I definitely recommend moving away from buying books on Amazon if that is what you do. But here are some alternatives. If you don't want to buy books on Amazon, which I know can be very cheap, buy them very cheap on World of Books or Abe Books or ZVAB. ZVAB. I'm really bad with pronouncing letters in German, but yeah, anyway, that is my whole section on websites that I could not live without when I need books. And that is pretty much it for this video. I know that it was a bit longer than intended, and probably not everyone wants to sit through a 25-30 minute video when it's just about websites that may not be relevant to you. But I hope that at least one of these sections has been really helpful. This is basically a list of everything that I wish I had known earlier, and I'm very thankful that I know about them now while I'm still in the middle of my PhD, rather than finding out about them afterwards. But if you have questions about any of these websites, definitely feel free to leave a comment. I have left links to all of them in the description, as well as a link to the template that Jenna Hong put up for her Notion template. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching, and I will see you with another video very soon. Bye!
There's too much noise around